I was able to attend a press screening of Ballerina last night, June 2nd, so I'm laying out all my thoughts right now. You guys know I haven't been the biggest fan of John Wick 3 and 4, way too over the top for me. I was particularly annoyed with John Wick 4, even though there were things about it I could recognize were entertaining and well done. So initially I wasn't super interested to check out Ballerina, but one of the main pulls for me for this movie was Ana de Armas. Now, I remember her from a long, long time ago when she used to play in this little Spanish telenovela called El Internado, way before she could even speak English. So it's been interesting to see her rise to stardom here in the US. Anyway, she was the main reason that I was curious, and I'll just get this out of the way right now. I enjoyed this more than John Wick 3 and 4, but it skates a fine line for me, and I'll delve into that a little bit more as I talk about my thoughts on Ballerina. This is a movie that was directed by Len Wiseman, who is the director of the Underworld movies, or most of them anyway. I really like Underworld. Well, the first one, fantastic movie, absolutely love it. I want to be Kate Beckinsale one day. Or Celine. Anyway, it was written by Shay Hatten, who, interestingly enough, wrote John Wick 3 and 4, which is probably why some elements of Ballerina remind me of 3 and 4. I was comparing it to those two films quite a bit in my mind while I was watching it. It stars, of course, Ana de Armas, Keanu Reeves. Fans will enjoy watching those scenes with him in it. He doesn't have a teeny tiny bit part, but he's not in here a ton. However, when he is in here, it's enjoyable. Anjelica Huston is in here, Gabriel Byrne, Norman Reedus, Ian McShane, and Lance Reddick. It was bittersweet to see Lance's appearance in here. He's not in here a lot, but still, what a terribly sad shocker when he passed. This film is set during the events of John Wick Chapter 3, Parabellum. In fact, there's a scene that they either recreate or take a portion of it from that movie that they show kind of in the beginning part of Ballerina. And so the basic premise is that Ana de Armas plays Eve. Her father is killed by this cult or group of people, and many years later she decides to go on a revenge quest to get back at the people that took her dad from her. Along the way, she finds out more about her past and her father and the people that were after her when she was a child and all of this stuff. In comparison to John Wick 3 and 4, it feels like there wasn't the exact same level of action in this film as there was in 3 and 4. There was still a lot. I feel like there was more than what was in 1 and 2, or especially 1, but not quite as much. So it's a little bit kind of middle ground there. But I think the reason for that is because this is fundamentally an origin story. So they had stuff that they had to establish. They had framework they had to build upon. And it also is showing what happened when she was a kid, and then later when she is, learning to become part of the Roma Ruska, and it's showing her training and all of that. One of my favorite scenes in here happened to be a montage scene of her in her training. I thought that was really well done. Some other things that worked was there was quite creative fight choreography, just like there was in the John Wick movies. Even though I'm not crazy about 3 and 4, I could recognize the fight choreography was pretty interesting, intricate, and creative. There were some kills and items involved in those kills that were pretty clever, kind of inventive, and some of the kills also elicited some chuckles from the audience, many of which were members of the press. There were also some really well done moments of choreography, despite some occasional missteps, and by missteps I mean where it's obvious that it's choreography. I've mentioned this before many times, the obvious ducking to miss a very high kick or high punch, things like that. They couldn't quite cover up all of those moments. I do feel that Ana de Armas pretty much held her own quite well when performing the stunts that she did. I mean, she's already kind of established herself as someone who's capable in action settings. I know she was in the James Bond movie. I didn't see it, but I know that she was part of that, and action and everything that went into it. And there's quite a bit of action in here. And I felt like she did a pretty solid job performing the stuff that she did perform. Something else that I really appreciated was the acknowledgement, or at least early on in the movie, the acknowledgement of her limitations because she's a female, she is specifically instructed that she's always going to be smaller, she's always going to be weaker than any man she goes up against. And so she has to learn to adapt to that. She has to use her surroundings. She has to improvise. She has to fight smart. She has to fight dirty, fight like a girl. So I liked that messaging. It doesn't seem to stay consistent throughout, because by the time the film is done, she does feel like kind of a female version of John Wick, though they don't always portray her as being someone that is physically stronger than the men she's fighting. Actually, they don't really, though realistically, if you're thinking, wow, there's just really no way she could have kind of held her own as long as she did. But something that they do often is show her using the tools around her, tools that are available to her in order to fight the fights that she does. So it's not like she's a kick-ass woman and no man can physically stop her or anything. In fact, she does come up against one person who bests her. I won't tell you how that plays out, but there is an acknowledgement that she isn't girl power 100%. Yet at the same time, the stuff that she's able to do requires quite a bit of suspension of disbelief. However, having said that, this is something in the John Wick universe, and we see what Keanu Reeves' character went through in John Wick 3 and 4 that was just like, no way. But people loved it. They don't care. I cared. It bothered me. So this is some of the stuff that kind of made this film a little wobbly for me. You know, I think this is probably more of a me thing, because I feel like fans of 3 and 4 will probably enjoy those types of elements in here, because that's what you're getting, because the writer is the same. I also liked some of the dark humor that was on display sometimes, whether it was because of something situational or whether it was something in the dialogue. Also, as I already mentioned, some of the kills and fight scenes. There was a bit of laughter just because of how some things went down. It was like, oh my gosh, I would have never seen that that thing being used to do this. It was just kind of funny. I do feel like this being her origin story, it does give this film a bit more narrative substance, a bit more narrative oomph than we got with 3 and 4, because of course by then with John Wick 3 and 4, everything's already been established narratively for his character, and it's just one big fight at that point. There were some things that were fairly predictable to me, certain plot twists, or at least one specific plot twist that happened that I kind of, I figured out by the time it was revealed. Then there was another one, a little bit of a twisty thing regarding the character of Norman Reedus that I kind of didn't see coming. It's not something hugely major, but when it was revealed, I was like, oh, that's interesting. So, I guess that's another thing positive that can be said about it. I'm going to start talking a little bit now about the things that didn't work so well for me. Actually, I've kind of already woven that into my commentary. The unrealistic fight scenarios, how she is able to, and this happened in John Wick 3 and 4. So this, this is really, it's just kind of more of the same. Her being able to fight off waves of opponents with pretty much little consequence. Maybe she gets a little blood here. She gets smacked around a lot. She is thrown around so much in here. She gets her ass kicked a lot, but she shows very little physical signs of it. There's no huge face swelling, which would of course happen. There's just a nice little trickle of blood down the side of her face, that sort of thing. And it's just like, okay. And as I've already mentioned, it veered a little bit too much into John Wick 3 and 4 territory with, as I've touched on already, extreme endurance, physical endurance with minimal visible damage to things that would have taken someone out in about 5 minutes. But it's John Wick. There you go. So maybe you'll love that. Unfortunately, this lack of being a little bit more grounded in realism, it holds this movie back a bit for me. I did not outright despise it like I did John Wick 4, but it skates real close to that territory. I've already talked about other things like the choreography, obvious misses, missed punches and kicks and stuff. And there was another thing that kind of stood out to me as well. The very beginning of the movie takes place 12 years before the events of the main story. And Anjelica Huston and Ian McShane are in that prologue-y scene. I feel like they should have done some de-aging on them because, yeah, okay, it's 12 years, so not like 20 or 30 years worth of de-aging, but it feels like there should have been a bit more because they looked exactly the same 12 years later in the story. Maybe there was some de-aging, but if there was, it wasn't something that was super obvious to me. But, like I said, again, it's 12 years. You don't always age that dramatically in 12 years, but at the same time, you do age noticeably. So, that was just kind of another thing that stood out to me. So my overall impression is, if you haven't figured it out already, I have mixed feelings about Ballerina. I like the elements of her backstory. I liked the creative kills and the tie-ins with the Wick universe, but that unrealistic action that was going on and the John Wick level of invincibility kind of pushes this movie away from the type of thing that I enjoyed about the first John Wick, which I think is a fantastic movie. But if you like the crazy stuff, like I said, you'll probably really dig this. If you prefer the more grounded tone of John Wick 1 and kind of, it was a little bit better in John Wick 2, you're probably going to be rolling your eyes sometimes. As far as how things conclude, there's definitely a door that's left open for the possibility of a sequel. I have a feeling if that happens, we're just going to get more of this crazy high-octane action, just like what we were getting with the later John Wick movies. And so I feel like that will definitely be something that will hold back a potential sequel for me. I'm just kind of calling it right now. I just have a feeling that's going to happen if we get a sequel. While this film didn't annoy me quite as much as 3 and 4, it came close, like I've already said, but, it's likely because same writer. Wish we could get the original writer, the writer for John Wick 1, to come back in and sort of scale things back just a skosh. I just think it would make for something better. As of now, I think that's about all I have to say about Ballerina. If you guys get a chance to check it out, let me know what you think. And that's it for now. Adios.